Hi, my name is John Bauer, and today I'd like to talk about a piece of Stanford open source software. We call it Stanza. It's a multilingual, multi-domain Python NLP toolkit. So what that means is we cover several different processors or annotators for analyzing raw text, and we cover a wide variety of human languages. So Stanza was originally written by 3 grad students in the Stanford NLP group, Yuhao Zhang, Peng Qi, and Yuhui Zhang. 2 of them have since graduated, and the third one has moved on to other projects at Stanford. So it's now being maintained by me and a collection of other Stanford students. The supporting professors are Curtis Langlotz and Chris Manning. And here's the current Stanza team. Jason Bolton and I are both research engineers with the Stanford NLP group, and a collection of undergrads have recently joined the group working on our project. Anwisha Mukherjee, Gordon Chur, Hong Boy, and V Tai have all been very instrumental in contributing to the project over the summer. So the Stanford NLP group as a whole is composed of several different professors and about 50 students, postdocs, and staff. Here's a picture of us taking a hike over the summer when COVID was at its lowest. So today I'm going to talk about several different things. First, I'm going to give a brief overview of all of the open source software at Stanford. Then we'll start talking about Stanza and its original form, the biomedical packages which were recently added to Stanza, an example of using Stanza, and then the new features we've added in the past year, and the roadmap for the upcoming features. So to begin with, at Stanford, for a long time, we've been maintaining a Java toolkit called Stanford CoreNLP. A lot of people in the industry may already be familiar with it. It has been around for many years. Although I've never met Pavel, I do know that I very much appreciate his positive comments about our toolkit. It's available at the website listed here, and we have an online demo available. It's written in Java, which means it doesn't use the latest deep learning techniques or highly tuned GPU app performance, but it does have many years of dedicated work on improving the performance on several human languages. Here's an example of its usage on a small phrase of English text. You can see that we do dependency parsing. We have a co-reference annotator, which is where you take pronouns and try to refer them to the previous noun that was mentioned. And we have a named entity recognizer, where it is finding the specific named entities, such as people, places, countries, and other important named entity types. There's a wide variety of other annotators, and we cover several different human languages with CoreNLP. Recently, we've released version 4 of this. Some of the major changes are in English. We updated the tokenization and other resources to the latest version of the LDC resources. So as a simple example of that, the tokenization changed. You can see that instead of 1 word, a hyphenated token is now 3 words. We find this much more useful for processing hyphenated words or other sentences or phrases where you want to know the individual meaning of an individual component rather than clump everything together as 1 token. For Spanish, French, and German, we've also switched to universal dependencies as the input data. Universal dependencies is a widely contributed to and maintained data source. This is available at universaldependencies.org, and a lot of Stanford people have contributed to that, including myself and Professor Manning. And there's also, as part of Stanza, there's a Python interface, which allows you to use the CoreNLP tools from a Python program. So some of these tools include tokens regex and also Semgrex. So these are 2 different variants on regex, where instead of doing a grep over individual words, you can specify the grep patterns over the tokens themselves or over dependency graphs. I'll show an example of that a little bit later. In the most recent version of CoreNLP, from University of Pisa, there was a tokenizer package provided called CoreNLP IT. This is a generalized tokenizer, so this allows us to expand it to more languages we use this to produce an Italian and a Hungarian pipeline. As part of the Italian pipeline, we've also included NER dataset provided by FBK. So we were unable to find an Italian NER dataset suitable for our uses, so this university graciously provided this to us. We've also improved our Python interface, and we've included the models and software as part of a Hugging Face integration. So it's now available there, which is great. Hugging Face very graciously provided us storage space, so now we can take advantage of their CDN, faster download times, more reliability. Another piece of software that we've maintained for some years is our glove word vectors. So this is a widely used source of embeddings. For those unfamiliar, word embeddings are when you're doing a neural network, you want to have numbers at the bottom layer instead of words. So a word embedding is you can translate the words themselves into a vector which represents the bottom layer of inputs. So glove helps produce these embeddings. We've provided different embeddings for English, and then a wide variety of people around the world have applied this to various other languages. I've seen glove embeddings for Hindi and Italian, for example. Recently, the NLP group has participated in creating the Center for Research on Foundation Models, especially Persu-Liang. So this is a new package for training large language models. We've currently reproduced GPT-2, small and medium, and we're working to scale on larger GPT models. We're also, this foundation is working to study the effects of foundation models, such as GPT-2, and democratize them for wider public use. GPT-3, as you know, is produced by OpenAI. That's not exactly available for everyone to use freely, but the goal is we're going to produce models which are. There's a few links here where you can learn more about this. Also part of the NLP group, we have a couple dialogue agents. So Chirpy Cardinal is an open dialogue agent. Here's a brief diagram of explaining how it works. It allows you to chat about any conversation topic. This is also open source software. A part of this is our Oval interactive dialogue agent for tasks. So this is also available. Both of these are available as part of the NLP group's open source software. Here are a couple links to show you where you can learn more or to download the software. So now, moving on to Stanza. First, I'd like to explain a bit about the motivation. So in English, for our CoreNLP pipeline, we have a very fine-tuned tokenizer, for example, and many models which we spent quite a lot of time working on. So in the case of a hello world text, we break it up into individual pieces, and then we find part of speech tags, we apply parsing to it, and then as we saw earlier, there's coref and a wide variety of other annotators. So the problem is each of these took a lot of time. The tokenizer, for example, has been maintained for years to include all of the possible rules for the English language. So when we start to apply this to some of the other languages CoreNLP supports, you can see there's less expertise in the languages in our group, and there's also less refinement to the rules as a result. So then if you want to apply it to all of the languages of the world, this becomes very difficult. Although I should point out that recently we've had 2 Vietnamese students join the group, so perhaps the bottom language should no longer be in red. Nevertheless, we can't possibly support all of the languages in the world using this approach. So the limitations are limited multilingual linguistic resources. The models rely heavily on handcrafted rules. So the Stanza NLP Toolkit, it has full support for universal dependencies. I've already tried to introduce this. This includes well over 100 languages. We've winnowed it down to 70 languages where we find the data sets large enough. It's a fully neural pipeline. So the models themselves can be trained on a new source of data. And we've started applying that to data sources such as Thai, where we find that the universal dependencies are not sufficient, but we can add in external data sources. Currently, we have models supporting 70 human languages. And there's also included with this is a Python client interface to the Java CoreNLP library. So here's an introductory use case. A colleague of mine in the biology department had a project. He wanted to find examples of sentences such as this: malaria is a parasitic disease spread by mosquito bites. He wanted to know, for the disease such as malaria, what is the vector? Here it's clearly mosquito. If you were to search on Wikipedia, they even have a little text box telling you that it's mosquitoes. However, for many of the diseases in the world, Wikipedia doesn't have this kind of useful text box. So we had to gather Wikipedia, online articles, etc. So first we apply a tokenizer, and then we filter out only the sentences which have the disease in that were the disease in question. In this case, malaria. The universal part-of-speech tags are not necessarily needed for this part of the project, but they are needed for the dependency parsing. So here, if you look at the parse, you can see that the keyword we care about is spread and how it's spread. It's spread by mosquito bites. So then there's, as I said, the Semgrex is a grep equivalent for dependency graphs. So in this case, we can start from spread. We care that something is biting a person. And that something is the vector that my colleague cared about. So in this case, if we go back to the graph, you can see spread by some kind of bites results in mosquito. So this is exactly what my friend was looking for. The first neural component that we care about is the tokenization and sentence segmentation. There's multi-word token expansion. There's part of speech and feature tagging, lemmatization, dependency parsing, and named entity recognition are the original components of Stanza. So the first one is the tokenization and sentence segmentation. So using character embeddings, which are similar to the word embeddings, but specifically to characters, we run a BIOS-TM on this, and we find specifically the tokens, the locations where a multi-word token might be found, and a sentence splits. Using this, we split raw text into different sentences, which can be further processed further using the rest of the components. The next components are the multi-word token expansion and lemmatization. Lemmatization is when you take a word such as, so if you were to take a word such as won't in English, this is a multi-word token. You would imagine it split into will and not. However, if you split it simply based on the characters, you get WO, and the lemmatization would turn that into will. So this is this is a sequence-to-sequence learning task. We used a very similar model for both of these projects. So the first here is a dictionary. So in the example of won't, for example, you can do a dictionary lookup and return will and not for that. And if that doesn't work, which is going to be the case for languages such as German or Spanish or any language where there's a lot of words, individual syntactic words put together into one token, we run that through an encoder-decoder. And similarly for cities, similarly for the lemmatization token processor, where you take cities and turn it into city. The next models after that are part of speech and dependency parsing. Once again, these start from the word embeddings. We run this through a BIOS-TM. We get out a representation of the head and the dependent. We run this through a biaffine transform to get the relation score between the two words. And a similar structure is used for part of speech tagging and morphological features. The final of the original components is the named entity recognizer. So once again, this starts from a BIOS-TM. We run this we include the word embeddings, run it through another layer of BIOS-TM, and get out results through a CRF decoder. So the goal is to take words such as Stanford, recognize that's an organization. And we pre-train these with large corpuses. So we've run this on many languages. So the original universal dependencies, we get 70 languages, over 112 data sets. And recently we've added multiple NER languages. The complication for NER is this is not available as part of a universal website such as universal dependencies. So these languages have to be found by hand, which is more time consuming. but we've added multiple individual languages over the past year. Recently, we added biomedical and clinical English packages. This is a widely requested feature. So we have syntactic analysis similar to the UD for two biomedical packages, Craft and Genia. And we also have NER models trained specifically on diseases, treatments, other biomedical literature tests. So there's 8 different models from different input data sources. So there are not many packages out there which handle biomedical tree banks. We find that ours is both very performant, very accurate, and also relatively fast. There's a spacey biomedical text where using a GPU, we're only 1.4 times slower, but we are, as we saw, significantly more accurate than side-spacey. Once again, this demo is available at stanza.run. This one is on the bio part of that website. So here's a brief introduction to using Stanza. It's installable either with pip or with conda, and it's very simple to get to the introductory examples. So this is just a very simple explanation. You can run this code and you get back the part of speech. There's several other features are going to be connected to the sentences and the words as the output of the document. So the biomedical models are going to be the same thing. You simply need to specify the particular biomedical model that you want to run on. And in the end, you get back the result of the named entities for the problem or the treatment. There's also a CoreNLP interface for the Java part of our open source. Once again, we've tried to make this as simple as possible. So very similar interface to the Python interface for the Stanza models. So in the past several months, we've added several new features. There's a language identification model. There's dictionary features for the tokenizers to improve those. There's a syllable model specifically for Thai. There's combined data source models, a constituency parser, and significantly more Hugging Face support for downloading the models. So the language identification model is a classifier model. We've included, that's based on a specific publication from Apple. Here's a very simple example. If you put in a few different sentences, it will tell you which languages they were run on, they were written in, and it will also run the pipeline specifically on those languages. So you don't need to know ahead of time which language you're operating on. Should be significantly more convenient for mixed language text. The dictionary features. So here's a simple example of the motivation behind why we need this. So a Vietnamese poster, it was attempting to announce that keeping the family size small would make the family happy. Of course, they want to, this was the message they were trying to convey to, keep the population growth from getting too extreme. However, if it's segmented incorrectly, lots of people pointed out that it made it sound like the husband will be happier with 2 wives. Now, having a family with 2 kids already, I feel like this may already be, that if I were to add more wives and more children, I don't think I'd really be happy. But at any rate, it's easy to missegment this and get the wrong idea out of it. So what we did was we added dictionary features where specifically longer words were favored. And this greatly improved the tokenization accuracy. This applies best to languages such as Chinese or Vietnamese or Thai, where the text is written without specific white space. A language such as English, the white space is the most defining feature for the tokenization. For Chinese or Vietnamese, the white space doesn't give you the necessary clues. So the dictionary proves quite valuable for improving our tokenization. Similarly, we've added syllable features. These are going to be quite useful in Thai, especially. In Chinese and Vietnamese, the syllables are extremely obvious. The characters in Chinese and the syllables in Vietnamese are white space separated. But in Thai, everything is written together as one long string of text. So this improves the accuracy once again. It'll also be useful for other languages, such as Myanmar, Khmer, or Lao, should we find those data sets. We're working on the Myanmar one right now. The next feature we've added, so the models were trained from an input data source The English ones were mostly from the English Web Tree Bank, written from web text. So someone has a typo for tomatoes, and that made its way into our data source. The principle was not to change the incoming data, but the problem is the output model learns that tomatoes should be spelled without the E. So this is kind of hopeless to fix it. There's no natural language processing we could apply directly to this model, which will fix this typo. But what we do is we add more data and make a larger model out of all of the available data. The larger model includes tomatoes spelled correctly, so now the model will correctly produce the output for tomatoes. So similarly, so I mentioned a few times the idea of splitting won't. Other words such as gonna. These are pretty easy to split in English because there's a finite number of them. In Spanish, you can get longer words which are both the verb conjugations and the pronouns attached together. So there's a huge number of previously unseen combinations of these. So, and then another tricky part in Spanish or Italian is the verb endings are going to be very similar. If it's never seen this verb volver, it actually doesn't know what the correct ending is going to be. So our solution here is to produce a hand-built data set which covers a large variety of Spanish verbs, Italian verbs. The Italian ones were given to us courtesy of Professor Attardi, and the Spanish one was a student project over the summer. On a synthetic data set, this greatly improved the performance of our splitting and lemmatizing the object pronouns from the end of these verbs. So we've also integrated Stanza with Hugging Face. So this gives us CDN capability, which we did not previously have. A few times we had cluster outages, and we would immediately get, posts on our GitHub saying we can't download the models. That should hopefully be fixed now, thanks to the generous donation from Hugging Face. Another model we've added is a constituency parser to Stanza. So constituency parsers are going to be different from dependencies in that they keep entire sections of the tree together until you get to the very bottom layers. So we've based our current model on an in-order transition model from a previous publication from outside of our group. Our goal is to add more features to it based on our own research, and to also add additional languages. This is similar to universal dependencies versus NER in that we're going to have to scour the web ourselves for these data sources. So currently we only have English available, but the goal in the next few months is to add several more. So coming soon, in addition to more languages for both NER and the constituency parser, we're going to be adding more languages for which were not part of universal dependencies. So Thai and Myanmar are two that we've identified as particular additions. We've also found that there's Khmer data sets available, which we hope to add. We also hope to add a summarization feature based on the work of Abby C. from the NLP group. And we're going to integrate transformers at the bottom layer of the input. Instead of word embeddings, there's much more recent work such as BERT or FLABERT or Roberta. They all have BERT in the name recently. They greatly improve the accuracy of downstream models. We hope that this will improve the accuracy overall of Stanza. So here are some links for where you can find out more. There's Colab notebooks to provide a gentle introduction. It's freely available on pip and conda if you want to install it. And there's quite a bit of documentation on our GitHub and on github.io. Thank you for attending. I'll be available for questions, and we respond as quickly as we can to issues on our GitHub page.